Hello, everyone. Welcome at our core protocol sync. We'll share shiny updates from last week on the DSN and consensus side and some things that may be happening this week a bit later. Shamil, do you want to kick us off as usual?
Sure. Last week, I've changed caches for nodes and farmers and start testing the DSN with help of Nazar and Vedavias. Thank you, guys. I created a couple of scripts and ran 5 nodes and farmers with a separate bootstrap nodes for node and farmers networks on a separate machine. And it is working for 3 days now, so no issues so far. Between test runs, I had time, and I created a PR for the upstream lip2p repository. That code relates to the custom record store API. Also, Protocol Labs responded to our bug report and suggested a new version, but it doesn't seem to work. I tested it. Over the weekend, I started to research a possibility for adding metrics to the lip2p events, and it turned out that lip2p already contains this feature. And I finished adding it today and created a PR. However, for some reason, not all metrics are present. And for example, for Kademlia, start providing or request response protocol, and it makes sense to add them both for our branch and upstream repository as well. So for this week, I will continue these tests, but my main focus will be debugging that Kademlia issue again. If I have time, I will also fulfill a request from Nazar to change the cache algorithm for farmer from the current circle of buffer container to some version of heap data structure. That's it.
Cool. Thanks, Shamil. I had that idea, I'm not sure we discussed it, about the DSN connecting node to the farmer. So that if you have a simple setup where you have a node and a farmer, we can just delete the RPC endpoint for the pieces, and you can just connect farmer to that single node that we have, and still use DSN, but like in kind of local network situation.
It is possible. Well, we need to just verify that we don't need all other methods from RPC.
No, we need other methods. What I'm saying is that RPC will be still there, but we can like send back through RPC an endpoint of the node, so farmer can connect via DSN to that node. And in case you don't provide any bootstrap nodes whatsoever. So at least in a simple test setup, you don't have to run bootstrap node and you will still have connectivity. Or similarly, once we have the actual deployment, we don't need to specify bootstrap nodes in the CLI on the farmer. It will be sufficient to add a new field to the chain spec. So we can have in the chain spec both the bootstrap node of the kind of substrate side and of the DSN side. And we can distribute that and update that kind of centralized way.
It is possible, if I understood you correctly. However, I have a concern that it makes too complex path for getting that endpoint from the DSN. It's dependent on different components, but we could discuss.
I mean, you still need RPC connection before farmer can start. So I think we can potentially just query that.
Okay, it's a viable idea. We could discuss it later, no problem.
Awesome.
Why not to query like bootstrap nodes from the node, like from the RPC endpoint? Like we could add RPC endpoint for that.
Right, but we can use the node itself as a bootstrap.
Yeah.
So if the node has something in bootstrap, like it will kind of propagate automatically. Okay.
Do we have any like documentation right now on what our bootstrapping procedure is, or we're just using the defaults in Substrate and lib2p?
It's kind of the default.
And also, we just for information, we use different bootstrap nodes for a separate DSN network and a substrate network.
Yeah, basically the idea is that we have some bootstrap nodes to which we are trying to establish a connection, and then from time to time, depending on how many peers we have, we are doing random walks over the network and just populate our key buckets. That's how it works. It's the same way that Substrate is actually implemented internally. There's no like out of the box feature like that, but you can write a few lines and you can make it work.
Okay. just given the complexity of our dual bootstrapping procedure here, it might be valuable for us to try to document that kind of the way that BitTorrent documents its bootstrapping procedure.
I think once we have more kind of stability in the DSN side, we can potentially think about replacing the Substrate protocols with our protocols. We already have request response mechanism. We can just use that instead of Substrate's request responses. And then for subscriptions, we can also invent something. So in that case, we will not have to have two bootstrapping procedures. We will have just one network that will be shared by both node and like DSN part of the node, and the same on the farmer. And when we are talking about the SDK will be able to create just one instance and share it across like 3 use cases: DSN connection in the node, Substrate stuff in the node, and farmer, and then also for domains potentially, but we'll see. So we can have like one connection for everything basically, instead of having tons of different peer-to-peer versions and connections and stuff. Okay, any other comments about DSN? Awesome. Ivan, you had some small updates. Maybe you want to share, and maybe you have any comments, questions?
Yeah, yeah. So last week I basically we merged a pull request about like adding a new callback for a farmer. Yeah, new solution callback. Yeah. So SDK wanted to be notified about like new solutions. So for example, like CLI could print that we received some new solution and like get some rewards, for example. Yeah. So we merged that. And we had some discussion with Nazar about the like adding initial plotting progress subscription or some form of that, so that we would not notify it about the end of like initial plotting. Yeah, it's like we we don't plot like all of the sectors. If we like we skip some sectors, for example, if we like already plotted them before and they are not expired. So like CLI and SDK want to be notified about that. Yeah. So Nazar, what do you think? Like how we can approach that?
Yeah, actually, there is one bit of information which is already there. How many sectors we have already plotted. The only thing you don't know how many sectors there are. So maybe you can just add a method with that information, and you should be able to query it before starting. And then once you get notifications, you can just check what the index is. And once it approaches the end, you know the plotting is completed. That might be actually the easier way than whatever I described there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
And actually, for solutions, you could have already had that information available. If you create a custom RPC client implementation for the farmer, you can kind of intercept the response. But the way you did it makes sense. It's kind of linear. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all, man. Yeah.
Any comments about that from the team? Awesome. Let me share my stuff. There isn't much this time, actually. Is it sharing or not? Okay, I think it is.
It is.
So the first big thing we've discussed last time that landed, DSN farmer plot integration. I don't think we need to go through it again. There is a pull request with benches. The initial reason why I created that is I wanted to see which version of the KZG implementation is actually faster. In addition to just looking at the API. And there are simple benches here. We basically have creation of polynomial from the data. We can create, we can commit to it, create witness, which does another commitment internally, and we have verification. And that's basically all there is to it. There is a branch if someone is interested. Okay, ArcWorks, I think. In here, ArcWorks KZG. It does have implementation of the same kind of, but similar, it's slightly different types of API for KZG using ArcWorks library. So you can just look at it. Essentially does the same thing, and I see no reason to switch to it if it is slower. But in case someone wants to experiment, it is there. I did some refactoring on the that Avid something PR experiment.
Semi-Avid PR.
Yeah, semi-Avid PR experiment repository, and there I have methods kind of like for KZG. When before I extracted it, there is a simple API for creating polynomials, commit, witness verification, all kinds of stuff. And also I did the same API for the erasure coding, but we noticed with Daria that actually decoding wasn't updated. So we can erasure code it, and it does have homomorphic properties. When we are committing to it, we cannot decode it. So we cannot actually use it for anything practical. And it seems to be a little bit of a challenge to actually fix that. But Daria is working on that. So once that is ready, I will be unblock and be able to move with the version 2. Right now, there is kind of not much I can do about it, because the first step is to upgrade the archiving, and then once I have those polynomials, I can commit to them with KZG. But before I have those polynomials, I don't have anything to work with. And similarly, on the consensus side, I need erasure coding to get going. So that's unfortunate blocker right now.
Question on that, Nazar.
Yeah.
So we are so for the erasure coding step, we're interpolating a polynomial and then using that to create the erasure coded data, like a systematic code?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay, but you said we then can't decode that data?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like one-way transformation right now.
But it should be the exact same process, just to interpolate a polynomial and then reevaluate it at those initial indices.
I hope so, but the first attempt Daria had at it, she hinted that maybe we actually don't do encoding quite correctly. So homomorphic properties hold, but it is not actually correct erasure coding. So she's still working on it, TLDR.
Is this using the like the interleave scheme that was already in there, where it was alternating the source and the parity pieces like one at a time?
No, she did the version where the source data comes first and then the interpolated data.
Okay, I mean, it should work. I know sometimes she imagines that it might not work, and we spend a lot of time verifying things, but I mean, there's no reason it shouldn't work.
Yeah, I wrote a test, so as long as the two implementation for encoding and decoding match, it will pass, but right now it's failing. So
okay, all right, well, maybe we can deep dive on that later, because that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and also with the ArcWorks library, it is kind of awkward in terms of API. For instance, in the library we are using from Dusk, that Plonk library, when you provide it with data which is not multiple of the field element, or when the field element has more than 254 bits of data which is not supported, it will just return you an error. In ArcWorks, it does the opposite. It just truncates data whenever it feels like. If the degree is not enough, it will just increase it randomly to the next power of 2. And it's just really hard to work with, because you're doing one thing, you think you're doing that, but you're actually doing the other thing, so verification fails then. So maybe something like that is happening somewhere, like we do not provide the correct constant or whatever. That is an option, but it's still something we need to figure out.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. And also we have this
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a small question. When you're talking that ArcWorks is slower, it is slower than libraries from Dusk network.
Yeah, it was like 1.2 milliseconds versus 400 microseconds, so like 3x difference.
Oh, okay. And
I think I posted it in Slack.
When you are saying that we have encoding something but can't decode it, you mean our custom implementation?
I mean erasure coding.
Oh, different. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
The version that we modified. So we like create these parity pieces, but then we pick, even if we pick just source pieces, it still doesn't decode properly.
Okay, thank you.
We have like some other data out of it.
Yeah, and to be clear, ArcWorks is not meant to be a production library. It's actually not audited. It's actually said not to use it in production. It's just, we're just using it for testing purposes. So there's really no expectation that we're going to actually use ArcWorks in our network.
Yeah, we just need to get something working, and then we can separately optimize it while we are working on other stuff. We just need to get unblocked. Yeah, and if you want to look at that test case and stuff, I have a fork of that in my GitHub here. There is a branch called cleanup. And if we compare that, I guess like this, in the tests in here, towards the bottom, there is one test for the encoding decoding of ratio, systematic ratio coding. It's really simple. We generate a random file, we encode it with this function that Daria created, and then we are trying to decode it. And this download thing is just a way of expressing which shards we have, which we are missing, so that it can reconstruct whatever is missing. And in the end, we just try to compare whether input data is the same as decoded data, but it's not the same. And then there is the same test for the KZG stuff, which did work, but it was slower. So if you want to look at that, this is my fork, and I believe Daria has some even newer stuff on top of this branch in her fork. Last thing I worked on was on the code side, at least. We have this error which was on and off happening very rarely, randomly for a while, and we were not able to quite figure out what it is. Basically, the gist of it is that you get some block inbound that you are trying to import, and during the import process, the node is verifying that block, specific inherence, and it sees that the root blocks that are in the block actually do not match what you expect the root blocks should be. That either means that there are root blocks which shouldn't be present, or they are present but they're different. Either way, we had just this generic error, but we didn't have any insight into what was like expected and actual value. So that's the only thing I have changed in this pull request. So when we have it next time, we can at least have more details about what is happening. Otherwise, I have triple checked everything. I have no reason why it would fail. When you're running software at scale, you can get into weird issues like some memory corruptions and stuff, but I don't think that's the case. Like it is happening quite often, relatively to the fleet we have with all of the farmers. So there must be some edge case somewhere, and it must be also kind of racy because the same block is imported successfully on most nodes, but not on some nodes. This is still a strange issue, but at least we'll be closer once we have it in the next testnet. Closer to solution, I mean.
Maybe we should throw out like a bug bounty of 1,000 Subspace credits for that one.
Yeah, probably. I think on the code side, that's it, unless you have any questions. All right. Jeremiah, will you share something on the research side or not today?
Sure. Yeah, I can share some updates. So actually here, let me just share my screen and show what we got here. All right, let's go to okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. So polynomial PRs for Subspace v2. This was released last week. Definitely everyone on this call should read this document and be familiar with it. This document is a living document, and it will continue to grow as we learn more. Daria was able to update most of the diagrams to be more accurate. If you know what we just went through doesn't make any sense, if you read this document, it should make sense. And we're going to be publishing this soon to the community. Let's see. This is what we're going to be talking about with Chen this week, the ratio coding proof abstract protocol. So this is kind of the combination of the two papers, the one Joachim wrote and the other one by the other research team on succinct ratio coding proof systems. And the goal would be probably next week to start on the implementation of that. This is most of what Dario was working on last week. This is the archival constructions, taking basically some of the existing archival constructions and trying to adapt them or kind of imagine how they could work in the Subspace setting. So we kind of have a very simplified version of this, which I put into the spec, which Nazar is kind of working on for the current iteration of V2 consensus. But we wanted to do a little bit more thoughtful approach and analysis as to what would be the most optimal way. Ideally, we would be able to combine the archiving and the proof of replication process to kind of leverage the same commitments and some of the additive homomorphic properties of those commitments as part of the efficient verification. So I guess one way to think of that is right now we have like archiving as like one completely separate thing, and then plotting as one completely separate thing. And they're both starting to use a lot of the same underlying cryptographic primitives. And what, like in an ideal world, we're going to try to merge and simplify some of those things and then get some interesting properties between the relationship between those two. And this is a document which shows what that archiving piece could look like. This is what Oskin was working on the algebraic hash functions. So there's a special kind of hash function that you can use when you're working on prime order field elements, and it has these interesting homomorphic properties. So this write-up tries to kind of unpack the math for all that. And this is something which we are looking at using as a way to commit to commitments, or like take the 48-byte commitments and turn them into something which we can actually work with within an erasure coding scheme, or sorry, a commitment scheme, which would be like a 254-byte hash. More to follow on this. This is another one of the topics I'll be covering with Chen later this week. And then this is going to be the next step for Daria. Later this week is going to be working on some a couple of flavors of proposed POR constructions, or maybe simplified ways to think about those, since what we have right now is really a merger of several of those. And we do, just a note, I guess, well, Oskin's not here, but we will be having the research sync tomorrow instead of today, since Daria is out for the birthday. Okay, any questions about that from me?
Just a comment, we were discussing different versions of the consensus before. You were saying that there are like 3 flavors. The naive one that we had before and 2 others, but we did invent the 4th one, it seems like.
Oh, which one is that?
Like erasure coding stuff, this is like the 4th version. The second
Okay.
was Chia based, one was Chia based, one was Filecoin based.
Oh, okay.
It's
So there
like
was
a
like
fundamentally
Sloth,
different
Chia, Filecoin, and then
Yeah.
erasure coding. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Jeremy, do you have anything you'd like to share this time?
Nope.
Okay.
Just still learning. So.
All right. Thanks everyone
we-
for great work.
Do we want to ask Ning if he's got anything to share?
Ning, do you have anything to share?
Also do not have like developer progress to share.
Yeah, I think on the protocol side it will be a while, but maybe on the main side more.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks everyone again for great work last week. Keep up, and we'll see everyone on YouTube next week. Bye.